This is the Strategists, episode 4023. My name is Zane Velji. With me, as always, Shannon Phillips, Stephen Carter. Carter, you didn't get the memo. I don't know why you didn't get the memo.
I wasn't invited. I wasn't even told. No one even hinted to me that there was a plan.
We threw it at you very last minute. Shannon, do you want to let Carter in on the memo?
Well, the memo is that you're supposed to be in a different part of North America right now, even though Zane and I are in literally different ends of the country.
This is true.
And not the part that praises Allah on Easter Sunday. Not that part. Further south.
Praise Allah. He might come back. By the way, just to be clear, the country that she's talking about is Iran. We're both in Iran right now.
We're both in Iran.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. We're both.
Yeah, we thought it was a good time to book flights.
The Iran of North America, known as Mexico.
Yes.
Which is a problematic comparison. I don't know why Shannon made it. I don't know why Shannon said that.
Yeah. I don't know where. Zane just declared himself a member of the Epstein class in the first 30 seconds of the episode and just torpedoed the whole thing.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Stephen Carter. I am in a stolen conference room, okay? This is set up for what seems like a medical lecture. If people come bussing in here wanting to have a medical lecture at 7 p.m. at night, you will hear the following lines from me. They told me I could use this space. I will not clarify on who they is, and I'll see if I can get away with it, okay? Mm-hmm. Just so you know. Yeah. Just so you know. I'm going to give that a whirl. Stephen Carter, I want to actually give you dealer's choice, okay? I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about the fucking state of Alberta. Boundaries Commission stuff is hot and heavy. We now have some new education legislation. Oh, and by the way, the book ban is now creeping into public libraries. Yeah. So good fucking yay. We can talk about that first, or we can talk about a topic that doesn't really matter all that much, but I just love it, which is that Whit Fraser, who is the partner of Mary Simon, who is the Governor General, has pretty much told the media that they're on the way out. So we can go deep into who should Carney's next GG be. I want to do both of these topics, to be clear. I just want you, Carter, to figure out which part of this episode is going to be for the public and which part is going to be Patreon. So, could I have planned this ahead of time? Yeah, I have the resources of a medical conference. But why would I do that? Why would I do that, Stephen Carter?
You wouldn't. And here's what I think. What
do you think?
I think that the general public will be more interested in the Alberta discussion. So we should make the general public discussion about the Governor General. That's what I think. I think that Shannon will probably agree with me.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
She's so agreeable.
Okay, Shannon. Okay, there's two ways we can do this. We can walk through the criteria, which I, by the way, do want to do. But I have two names in mind. Okay, I have two names in mind. Do you want me to save that till the end, or do you want me to lay out the Zane Velji math and give you the two names in terms of who should be?
Yeah. We have to give the people what they want, Zane, because we already chose the boring topic for them to listen to. So let's go.
Okay, here we go. The next Governor General of Canada, Stephen Carter. We have an Indigenous, non-French speaking woman. Okay. As our current Governor General. There's more that she offers, but I'm hitting on some of the crass sort of
No, you're looking
basics.
at the check boxes.
Okay. So here's my take. The last two GGs have been women. I think we need a man. The last GG, Mary Simon, the current GG, I should say, has been criticized for a lack of French. So I think we need someone who is fluently French, and I'd argue even further, someone who is French-speaking first, Quebecois first, French-speaking first, okay? Stephen Carter, so I think we're going man. I think we're going white. I think we're going French-speaking. Now, when we think of skills, this is a weird time for Canada. I think we need someone who can understand the global terrain in a different way, who also understands the limits of the constitutional responsibility, the distinct sort of connection to the crown, which is often tough when you add Quebec to the mix, because this is a culture that has, at greater rate than the rest of Canada, rejected the crown. So you need someone who respects the crown, understands the role, but can also understand Quebec, can do French first, so there's no criticism there, can understand the map. You also have to understand it's Mark Carney, so he probably has less of a concern going down the more traditional white male path, which leads me to these two choices, Shannon Phillips and Stephen Carter.
There's two white men who meet those criteria?
The two white men, and in fact, when I say that they need to understand the terrain, they need to understand foreign affairs, there's very few jobs in the world that prepare you like that. Like
I know
politics.
where you're going.
Like politics does itself. So the two choices, Stephen Carter and Shannon Phillips, that I am giving you are Jean Charest and Tom Mulcair. as one of the two as the next Governor Generals of
Pass
Canada.
on both of them. No.
Yeah,
Tell me
wrong.
why this is
it's got to be
insane.
Stéphane Dion.
Okay, so
Oh
Stéphane
my
Dion
God.
was a two-way. He was a two-way. I just think he's got. Stéphane Dion is French Bob Ray to me, and I think he has done a lot of service in a lot of different ways. I think Dion would be too much on the nose. I think Charest and Mulcair would be a revival, and you're choosing slightly against partisan type, so it doesn't look like like every other pick, which is why I've put Charest and Mulcair as my picks for Governor General, whether that be this summer, whether that be next year, whether that be whenever. That is where I start. So inherently, I have given you my criteria. Disagree with either the outcome and or the work that got me there in terms of who would be next, in terms of what Mark Carney actually needs. Because as we've mentioned in the past, we don't necessarily get credit for the Governor General pick, but you certainly can wear blame, as Justin Trudeau did with the pick of Julia Payette. So I will leave it there, and I'll let both of you jump in, either with a response to what I put on the table or with your own criteria around what and who needs to be present as our next Governor General of Canada. Who wants to get started?
I think Shannon should start because Shannon has thoughts.
Well,
Shannon has thoughts. I haven't got a thought in my head.
Well, let's see if I can give you something to jump off of, Carter. I think you're right about Stéphane Dion, simply because the more I thought about it in the last 30 seconds, I thought about the Clarity Act, and that was quite on the nose, actually, for Quebecers at the time, and so probably not the right person to be holding that job when we might be going into a Parti Québécois government and a potential referendum. But it does have to be someone francophone for sure. It has likely Québécois, I would say. I don't really think it matters, man or woman. You're right that Mark Carney is far more likely to pull a Daniel Johnston and put a white guy in there. But they also have to be someone who can navigate talking to Westminster a bit and the Palace, I think. Just because if we're having national unity conversations both in Quebec and in Alberta, the King's already taken an interest in this. And so I do think, if we're taking that institution of the monarchy at face value, we do have to pay attention to that. I would say they have to be someone who's fairly deft with other heads of state, like in Europe, where they have some of their constitutional monarchies as well. I would say they probably have to be someone who's fairly deft with the Vatican, because the Vatican started to push a little bit on foreign policy as well. And you can see where they're holding themselves as kind of a counterbalance to U.S. imperialism. So I think there's that. And they might have to be someone who can navigate through minority to majority, right? If anybody starts to scream about the Constitution through that, generally speaking, that wouldn't pull in the GG, but we do remember during the prorogation with Harper and that whole thing, and whenever it was 2006, 7, whatever, that Michaël Jean actually had to, make public utterances and make a call. So I think for all those reasons, it's not Jean Charest or Tom Mulcair, because I don't think either of them have the horsepower to be able to navigate that, in my view, anyway. I don't think you're going to want someone who's actually closer to the government. And I don't think that he's going to care too much about playing against type, more than he's going to care. Mark Carney is an institutionalist, first and foremost. So he's going to care about someone who appreciates and understands the institutions. He's probably going to find a white guy to do that because that's his happy place, but yeah.
Stephen Carter, take this wherever you must. We have forced this and thrust this topic upon you. Although, to be honest, it seems like yesterday that we were discussing a similar concept around how to replace Julie Payette. That I was just thinking about that, and it seemed like that was like 6 months ago that we're having that conversation with Yumi and Corey. But here we are again, just based on this one article on Whit Fraser's comments that if Mary Simon is gone, what does Mark Carney need to think about in terms of his next GG? Shannon's put a lot on the table here. Respond to any of that if you'd like.
I think it's an English institution. I don't think that a francophone is necessarily the right place to go. I do think that someone who's truly bilingual in French and English would be an absolute requirement, but I do not agree with the idea that they must be French.
So you don't buy our, or at least I even went further saying Quebecois, Shannon's guy, French. But yeah, okay, interesting.
No, I don't believe we need to. I think that your relationship with the king, I think, is super important. I think that that's the primary and really the only foreign affairs responsibility. I was intrigued to hear Shannon so wrongly suggest that there would be some connection to other foreign entities. I think that ultimately it just boils down to what's your relationship with the Prime Minister of Canada and what's your relationship with the King of Canada. Those are the two relationships that I think you need to manage. And the other big relationship is being available to the general population and being a good ambassador to the Canadians. Being an ambassador to Canadians in this particular moment, I think might require a visible minority. I think that given the anti-immigration work that's happening here in Alberta and the anti-immigration work that has been prevalent in multiple locations across the country, primarily tied to housing, but we've seen our immigration drop to its lowest levels in decades because of an anti-immigration sentiment. And I think having a visible minority still might be required, even though it has been a visible minority and a woman so many times since. Well, how many do we have to go back? Like I just don't see it reverting to a white male, and I certainly don't see Thomas Mulcair and Jean Charest.
You don't see my outcomes. Yeah.
It won't be anybody from the political class. It'll be someone from the diplomacy class.
This is what I find.
The perfect person would be is Justin Trudeau.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that would cause some issues.
That would not happen. But I like that, Shannon.
Just being a chaos agent.
The job he's always wanted. Maybe that's what he thought the next job would be. Maybe that's what he was just working his way up to.
Kind of what he was doing before. Anyway,
but can I pick up on political class? That is an interesting. Like I have made the assumption baked into my sort of two sort of recommendations, or if you could call it that, my reckless speculation, that there needs to be someone from politics. Carter, you disagree. Shannon, do you have as tight of an opinion as I do around whether it needs to be someone from politics? I think there's a reasonable case to be made around why. You could argue that this current Gigi has not been as, present and in public and engaging, perhaps to no fault of her own, part of her personality, part of the work she's done prior to. But I, like Carter, agree that it will require that level of presence, which I think politics is a quick but often pretty accurate way to say someone's got those skills and has been road tested with those skills. So I'm curious if you, Shannon, have strong feelings around political past being on the list or a nice to have or completely off the list if you were advising Carney in terms of prerequisites.
I think they have to have a diplomatic past in some way because the time that we are coming into actually requires some of that. Mary Simon may not have been, super out there in terms of her public interventions.
Community engagement, right?
She changed a lot of things having to do with protocol, and in particular, Canada's Indigenous peoples having access to international protocol, and them actually being, part of our sort of national delegations and so on. So, there's most of that job is protocol, symbolism, that kind of stuff, but it really can matter, and it can especially matter when institutions are being tested. So I'm sure Mark Carney's happy place is somebody who speaks French who also used to work at Goldman Sachs. Failing that, I would be shocked if it isn't someone who has some form of diplomatic experience, or more so than political. Is I think where he would probably go. Just someone that he can trust, and someone that he can trust not to, make unpleasantries on the international stage. Because I can see a world where that stuff beyond the king becomes more important for our head of state to be engaging on.
You know what's
and
funny,
the head of our
Carter?
military, to be clear, right? Because that's the other role for this person is as the head of the military.
Fair point. I've got two sort of follow-up themes, but before that, a quick comment. Carter, because of the role that my mother-in-law is in, vice-regal affairs definitely takes more of my headspace than it, let's say, would otherwise. And I was thinking last year that the perfect GG replacement, the absolute perfect GG replacement, regardless of which conservative got into power, whether that was Pierre Poilievre or Pierre Poilievre, would be Mark Carney. Well, I was like, that this guy, he's got the connection to the king. He's got, maybe not diplomat, but like Governor Bank of Canada. Like, it would, and this is, of course, prior to Carney even announcing, prior to Trudeau even leaving. The thought I had was, and I even voiced it to a few people, would be like, Carney's your obvious GG, isn't it? Like, this is like, he could learn French. You guys have got capacity. He could make that shit happen, or he thinks he knows French. So that was, and how times have changed, Stephen Carter. Two questions for you. What do you think of Alberta? What do you think of, you're okay, because I'm intrigued by you don't have to have Francophone, you don't have to have Quebecois. So let's park that. Let's agree with it for a second. What do you think of just leaning into Alberta? Is that crazy? Is that like playing with fire shit? Or is there some wisdom there? Carney's an Albertan. Alberta's clearly having a moment, and it's in terms of its relationship with Confederation. I said 2 on the nose for Dion. Would Alberta also be 2 on the nose?
I think so. I think that, you'd be accused of politicking a little bit too much.
Sure.
Like all political decisions are politics, but it'd be a little bit too on the nose, as you were saying with Stéphane Dion. It would be interesting to pick someone from Alberta. First Nations representative from Alberta would be fascinating. But I just think that maybe it's going to be a francophone speaker out of New Brunswick or Manitoba. But I just don't, Bob Canoe could be great. Let's grab him. He's somewhat annoying to me right now. So let's take him out of the role.
Oh, it turns out he's got some political skill. Are you starting to understand that people like him and he's got capacity? Is that
no, neither of those things are true. He's just annoying to me.
Right. Yeah. Just to you. Just to you. Shannon, Carter brings something up. I'm going to let you have a shake on the Alberta question. Can you, this is going to sound crass, make the case for me for back-to-back Indigenous Governor Generals?
No, I think it's completely fine as long as they are bilingual. Le bilinguisme, on doit l'avoir.
The French has to be there.
Yeah. It has to be there. There's been a lot of carping. And I think going into this moment of, national unity conversation in Quebec, I don't think he can deviate off that. I really don't. And so when you put the case to me of an Albertan, I'm struggling to think of I'm sure someone, bilingual Albertans will come to me at some point, even out of the Francophone community. I know there's been tons of really interesting.
I mean, if he hadn't run for the Alberta NDP leadership, Nenshi would have been an interesting pick as a bilingual person of color.
I wouldn't call it.
It's fine.
I'm
saying in the hypothetical choose an Alberta-based GG.
He wouldn't pass the test of bilingualism. Mine doesn't. Right. And I started when I was 5. And
so that's interesting.
It's mostly a dump truck.
It's fluid. We're talking like deep, fluid, immersive. That's the level.
I think there has to be bilingualism. I think that people will lose their fucking minds if there isn't a bilingual GG in this moment in particular. I've seen people, making bad faith kind of arguments about Mary Simon. I think in that particular space of time in the country's history, it was absolutely appropriate to have an Inuit person taking on that role. I still think that going into, potentially having another referendum in Quebec, I don't think you can have a GG that's not bilingual. I saw Jason Kenney complaining about this a while back, which I thought was really fucking rich. Given the last time I saw that guy in the same room as a Governor General, it was Julie Payette, and she was giving a speech on the floor of the Alberta legislature, and he was on his goddamn phone the entire time. So much for his, respect for the monarchy. He puffs himself up as this big monarchist, but the instant it comes time to listen to a woman give a speech and get off your phone, he couldn't quite bring himself. So I thought that critique was rich coming from him, but I think the critique overall is warranted.
Carter, beyond the obvious, which I think we've now established, deep bilingualism is on the table as a non-negotiable. How else could Carney fuck this up? Talk to me about, like, I almost look at this as risk. Like, it's more than, like, and in some ways the political class choice has risk because they come with baggage, they come with a name, so there's a bit of a splash that you get. But there's also risk, right? Like, when you choose an ambassador, a former diplomat, like, no one knows who they are. Like, they can't really speak to their body of work other than where they've gone and how long they've served. So it doesn't make a splash. It doesn't give you the upside there, but it also kind of de-risks you. Talk to me about Carney's. What risk does Carney have? How could he fuck it up? And what risk should he take with this role? I guess is the B side of that question, right? Knowing that it is now available, that you're going to be, and not every prime minister, to be clear, gets to make a GG appointment, right? So knowing that, because we've had a decade of Harper and Trudeau, it seems like an obvious thing, but like in our volatile politics and a minority government, there's no guarantee that Carney gets to do this. More than likely, he holds a majority. He has a chance at doing this, but so how much risk should Carney take here, and what could be the fuck up level of risk that he takes? Talk to me about this.
Well, I mean, anybody who blows the vet. I mean, Julie Payette is the great example. I mean, she didn't play nicely with others, and didn't staff her office with the people that needed to play nicely with others. So anybody who doesn't pass a vet, that's going to be the big thing. And you may think, well, it's the Governor General. I mean, we don't dive into their personal lives until we do. We dive into people's personal lives when there is reason to dive into their lives. And the first 2 or 3 weeks of that person's life is going to be much different than the previous X number of years before. They have to be able to hold up under pressure. They can't snap. They can't break. They can't belittle. They can't push back. They have to be a seasoned diplomat with their staff, with the people around them, with the prime minister, and with the king. That's the given. So when Trudeau screwed up with Payette, it was primarily because the vet wasn't done properly. That no one asked the question, hey, is this the right person to be giving this role to? And is she going to surround herself with people that make the most sense? So I think when we're choosing a Governor General, we are choosing someone for symbolism, right? So getting the symbolism right is perfect. But having it be overly, broken because the vet isn't there is really what I'd be worried about.
So don't spend a lot of political capital. Rely on the vetting here. In America, they use this term called executive experience when people are running for president. I think they generally mean like senator is not executive experience, but governor is, or executive role at the presidential level is considered to be that. But when I use the term executive experience, I mean someone who's had the ability to coach teams, has good interpersonal, like you want to vet for that. Here's a follow-up question to you, Carter, and I'll come to you, Shannon, in a second. How much of a gamble would you take with age? I've always found age to be fascinating around the GG question and the LG question by extension, because it's usually a final chapter role, right? Like it's the cherry on top of a well-heralded diplomatic, political, community service, business, whatever, insert your term here, career. Would you, knowing what needs to be done, kind of throw that out the window and say, I'm fine with like taking someone in their prime, and as long as they're willing to give me their prime earning years, I'm happy to kind of take someone in their prime. And in fact, I want someone in their prime in this role because it is getting more serious and multifaceted. So talk to me about age. You want to jump in there first, Carter, and then Shannon?
Yeah. I mean, I want someone who's young, but not ridiculously young. I want someone who's got enough vim and vigor to really go all the places that they need to go. I think that your mother-in-law is a perfect example. She's been everywhere. She goes to everything. She has the vim and vigor required to fulfill the role. And I don't think that there's anybody in the province of Alberta who doesn't say, oh yeah, I've seen her at blank over the last 3 years. We run into her quite regularly. And we both bitch about not being able to see your son enough. It's upsetting for all of us. We want to see more Sufi. But this is a This is the challenge. You have to have someone who's got enough pedigree to go into the role, but you don't want them to be Don Ethel, who was a lovely man, who was the LG of Alberta, but just didn't have the vim and vigor to, really stand up to what Lois Hole, his predecessor, or Lois Mitchell, brought to the role with the vim and vigor and the constant running around. I mean, and the emotional attachment is something that we haven't talked about either. The emotional commitment that, the LG has brought, or the GG has brought to the role, requires a little bit of cultural heft, right? Which comes with a little bit of age. So having that cultural heft to invest and create the emotional heft, Lois Hole, when she gave you a hug, man, like, it was something you remembered. You remembered Lois Hole gave you a hug. And that's, I think that comes only with age.
Shannon, we talked about Alberta. We talked about bilingualism. Talk to me about age. I'm not the pitch. It's not a pitch I'm making, but it is an angle that, rather than later year, why not find like mid-career recruit, who's got the energy, who's clearly got the time capacity, can really professionalize this. Not saying it hasn't been professionalized, but I guess I am making a pitch, and find someone younger than we've historically seen.
It would be kind of nice to have, someone with the tailoring of a King of Spain. Now I eat humble pie. Right? That guy's out there looking pretty good on a daily basis. I agree, but
I'm looking this up.
Yeah. He's a fine looking dude. He's out there doing doing the Lord's work.
The JD Davgun of Spain, as he's known.
I
on
think
this podcast.
So. Okay, but I agree with Carter. The person has to be late 50s, early 60s, because in order to be able to do the job, you have to have some gravitas, and also to take the job seriously, you have to have some gravitas and some appreciation for it. Because otherwise, there are elements of this job that are completely silly, and if you are not of a certain vintage, or you haven't kind of internalized why it's important, and that outweighs some of the silliness of it. Because let's face it, having a monarchy is quite silly. Having a symbolic head of state is a little bit silly. In my view, it is less silly than the way that a Republican system works. I prefer the stability of a constitutional monarchy. I can do without the floppy-eared looking people living in Buckingham. But I don't care about the royal family. What I do care about is the stability of the institution, right? So you want someone who understands that. And I think that only comes with time in and around Canadian politics, public policy, and maybe even, in and around the RCMP, the military, these kinds of institutions of the rule of law, where you kind of develop an appreciation for this stuff.
Carter, two follow-ups to you on this as we wrap up this topic. Let's say Carney's internalized bilingualism. If you run into him and he asks you about this topic of all of them, what is the one thing that you're like, I have to make sure I get this to him in terms of a piece of advice on this hire, because I'm not sure anyone else will. So he's internalized bilingualism. And it could be answering the question, what role should Canada play? What you need to look for in this person? It could be a specific recommendation. I'll leave it as wide open for you as possible. But what's one consideration or piece of advice that you'd give them, that being like, don't forget about X. Don't forget about this. It could be, don't forget about this person. Don't forget about this qualification. Don't forget about this characteristic. Don't forget about Alberta. What would you want to tell them?
I'd probably start with, don't forget about the symbolism, right? The symbolism of choosing, a Sauvé or a Clarkson or Michelle Jean. These were symbolic choices. Even Julie Payette, who was the youngest, I think, Governor General that we'd had, there was a certain symbolism to it, and the symbolism of choosing Mary Simon still stands out. This is a symbolic post. Do not walk away from the symbolism. And so when you are considering who you're going to put into that role, make sure that there is a symbolistic rationale for that as well. You know, you're choosing someone from the First Nations in British Columbia. That would be fascinating. What would the symbolism choice? You know, what would we be saying if we chose someone from that region? And how does that person, you know, typify or exemplify the story that we want told? I think that Mary Simon, she may not have been the world's most prevalent or the most out there one, but I adored the choice because I thought that having an Indigenous person from the North was valuable and told a story about our Northern sovereignty that I wanted to have told, and the Indigenous peoples and the story that they wanted to tell. For me, it was a great choice. And I would say, when you're making this choice, come back to making it a great choice for the symbolic reasons.
And coming to you in a second, great point, Carter. In the Mary Simon sort of piece, represented it through what you just said, you know, probably no moment more powerful than, at least in my mind, on like Northern sovereignty, like her visiting Denmark in the heels of like that U.S. annexation talks, and us opening up our embassy there and having the Governor General, who's got clearly a kinship, not just with those people, but literally with those people, but also with that land, right? And to be like, oh yeah, that's a muscle we can flex in this particular moment. I like the symbolist aspect. I also like the advice because while Trudeau leaned into that at every turn, it was pretty much his calling card, right? What does this say? What is the message? What is the symbol? What's the identity? You could almost see Carney as being a lot more managerial about it, around like, you just got to get this done, get it out of the way, right? Like, and you could see, I think it's a good piece of advice. He asks you a follow-up question. He says, intriguing, Stephen. What should that symbol be? What would you triangulate that symbol for Mark Carney in this moment? Let's just assume it's going to be this calendar year. We can't predict everything about our geopolitics, but we certainly have a story about Canada in this 2026 year. What should it be with Carney in Canada in this moment right now? What should that symbol be? Should he ask you that follow-up question?
I think a unifying force, someone who all of Canada can stand behind. That is, you know, the bilingualism is essential. But, you know, a unifying force when we're having discussions about Quebec and Alberta separating at the same time, someone who is bringing everyone together. You know, that would be ideal. I just don't know who that is.
That's it. I mean, it is interesting, and it is something that's happened in the past where we've seen, I guess is one of the reasons why we've seen broadcasters be chosen, media personalities be chosen. Like politicians, they clearly have a gift of the gab, or at least tend to have that skill. But they've also been in your living room, you know, at least in those times, in a less fractured media environment quite often, which an Adrian Clarkson or a Mikel Jean. And I'm not saying Peter Mansbridge or Lisa Laflamme are that, but I can see like those types of, you know, choices. I don't know about their French at all, but those types of choices could like almost be like, oh, let's go with the star power, but let's not go politics. Let's go media. Someone who's been like a unifying force, a mediating force in a lot of this. Shannon, I'll allow you to respond to Carter, but also I'll get your one piece of, maybe only Shannon Phillips could have given this advice to the Prime Minister should he been seeking it on the GG file. What would you want to tell him?
Don't forget about the military, because this person's role is actually as the head of the military, the keeper of the Constitution, right? When you look at how our constitutional monarchy is structured, and they do a lot of work, you know, at a lot of military events and so on. And we are in a moment when we are expanding our actual enlisted military, when we are expanding our ability, our various military capabilities, when like massive new investments, but we still have huge issues with morale, diversity, equity within the military. We still have massive issues with extremism, with misogyny, with all of those things within the military ranks. Those remain issues, sexual assault, all of it. And so I would say that this could be someone whose symbolic pick could reflect the highest values of the Canadian military, a record of service potentially, and someone who can reflect some of that, the good values that we want to see more of, and less of the bad ones that we want to see less of as we expand our military capabilities and our number of enlisted people. And so that's the piece that I would say don't forget about. Because if we're going to be spending tens of billions of dollars, I think you want to be really careful and thoughtful about who the symbolic head of that organization is. I don't think Carney does star power, really. And so I don't think you're headed towards a Peter Mansbridge, even if he could,
even if he could utter a word of French.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be him. Carney doesn't feel like a star power in this role kind of guy, just because we know that he's, like got a personal relationship with the king. We know that he's big on sort of the institutions of the Westminster parliamentary system, even though he doesn't seem to show up at it very often. We know that he likes it and he has a lot of respect for it. And so I think he's going to go with someone who's got more of a record of diplomatic or foreign service.
I like this, Stephen Carter. Great job on this episode. I guess I'm calling it an episode because I'm just going to move on to Alberta because that was for the public. But the stuff that there really wants, Carter, the book bans, the boundaries, and the education fuckery, that's going to be paywalled because that's what we do. And that's going to start right now. StrategistPatreon.com. That's where you can subscribe to our Patreon, get all the other goodies. StrategistPatreon.com.